Oh, always the awkward positioning. Hello, how are you doing?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep,
Okay,
we're
good.
good. Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to NiCHE Conversations. I'm Jessica DeWitt. I'm one of the editors here at the Network in Canadian History and Environment, and today I am joined by Victoria Cosby. Do you want to tell us more about yourself?
Hi, so I'm Victoria. I'm a fifth-year doctoral candidate at Queen's University in the History Department,
Yeah.
and also a fan of NiCHE.
Oh, yeah. Woo woo. So last year in 2020, our editor Andrew Watson edited the series that was looking at just the way that the pandemic was affecting research generally amongst historians. And you wrote a post last September called Mobility and Mental Health, Finding a Balance Between Life and Productivity During the COVID-19 Pandemic. And I invite you here today just to, have a follow-up conversation about this topic. And yeah, so I thought I'd start off with just talking about, the basic topics of that piece. What was your experience with loss of mobility during the beginning of the pandemic, and how did that affect your academic work?
Well, I broke my knee in January 2020, and then 6 weeks later, I'd already been at home, but everyone else had to go home too.
Yeah.
So I was dealing with an upcoming surgery and uncertainty about the date of that because of the pandemic, which was obviously a weight on my shoulders, on top of trying to still be a productive PhD student, which is also not easy.
Yeah.
So I was really struggling trying to find a balance between still doing my physiotherapy, going to my appointments, and finding time for still keeping up with my teaching assistant and then teaching fellowship work and my research assistant work, and then the actual writing that comes with being part of a PhD student, while not being able to go to archives, which I was limited, and then everyone else became limited too.
Yes.
So part of me was like, hey, at least I'm not missing anything. But I know, which is so selfish. But the other part of me was really frustrated because I had wonderful friends who were offering to do things for me, and then they suddenly couldn't do it either.
Yeah, it's kind of like being lost in this island of isolation. And yeah, it's interesting to think back to that time, and it was very different in a lot of ways. And yeah, in your piece you just describe the difficulties, and it is difficult. And of course you're talking about a short-term disability, right?
Yes.
And then other people are dealing with long-term chronic disabilities, and how the pandemic kind of really brought that to light. And in some ways, the pandemic actually made some aspects of academia more accessible. So I was wondering if you want to chat about what you saw as some of the positives when it comes to accessibility and ableism in academia during the pandemic.
Yeah, it was actually, there were some really great things that I saw coming out, both because of my temporary disability, and my father's permanently disabled, and he works in academia. So I get to see things from multiple perspectives in that way. Yeah. One of the big things was allowing people to teach online. And I mean, we all love in-classroom interactions. But for people who deal with chronic illness or permanent disability, sometimes having the option of being able to teach from your home, and where your network of safety and security and your network of healthcare providers are, provides an opportunity for people who wouldn't be able to teach normally to teach and to share their experiences. Because I'm in Hamilton right now, and I was visiting my family now, but I was living here after I got hurt because I couldn't get into my 3-floor walk-up apartment with only one leg that worked. So I had to move home, and here were all my providers, my surgeon, my physiotherapist, my other appointment people. And I didn't want to go back to Kingston before I was ready, because I'd have to redo and make all those new connections and get on lists that would take months or even years to get on. So for people who are dealing with permanent chronic illness and permanent disability, moving to a new city can be absolutely debilitating, because you have to redo everything. You have to come in and explain all of what you're going through to practitioners who may not be as sympathetic as your previous ones, or just not understand the nuance because they weren't there from the beginning. And being able to conduct your research online. A lot of archives were really working hard to at least have some sort of access online. Is
Yeah.
also is good for people who are dealing with mobility issues, because traveling during time of COVID was impossible, but traveling for some people is almost impossible all the time.
Yeah.
Like I knew that I wasn't going to be able to go to an archive unless I brought like my mother or my sister with me to help me navigate on crutches and then a cane and a leg brace, and the fact that I could only walk a few hundred meters before I got exhausted.
Yeah.
So a lot of things like the Archives of Ontario are wonderfully accessible, which is great. But some older archives are much less accessible, and some university campuses are not the best for people with mobility issues. I know Queens is an old campus, so some buildings just aren't easy to get through. Even the building my office is in, the elevator works sometimes.
Yeah.
And that's because it's an ancient elevator. So I've seen people get stuck, and I very much fear getting stuck somewhere when I was not going to be able to do anything but bum scoot down the stairs.
Yeah.
Which is a little humiliating. And that's the other thing. Sometimes accommodations for people who are dealing with chronic illness or disability are infantilizing, and that's really frustrating for people who are doing what is their career and their research. You want to be treated as another fellow academic, not as someone who needs help getting up and down the stairs. So it's really nice, some of the things that have come out of all this, because you really get to see people who might not have a chance to share their research sharing their research. Even with conferences, I did so many conferences because I didn't have to travel.
Yeah.
And that's good for people with chronic illness and disability, but also really good for people who don't have money, which is many grad students in early career academics. We don't have the funds to go to Paris easily, but with conferences being online, they could share their research. And just because you don't have money or your legs don't work doesn't mean your research isn't good. So I found that to be actually a bit more almost like an equalization between different types of experiences of grad school, which was awesome because I got to hear some people I would have never heard speak. I think we've all attended some talks from people in, Australia. You would never get to see them, but you did because they were doing their talk online, and it was so awesome.
Yes.
So there's been, with all the very many negatives we're all aware of, there have been some really beautiful things coming out of this too.
Absolutely. Yeah, I for one have loved the increase in online conferencing, and so I left the traditional academic track about 2 years. No, maybe it's almost 3 years now. Woo! 2.5 years ago. But one of the main reasons I did that is because I have a severe migraine disability, and I have a headache or a migraine of some level nearly every day. So like 350 days out of 365. And at any point during any day, I could just be wiped out and be like, I have to go lay down, and it took me a while to like really just deal with that. It's like, I don't know if I can do like a traditional job, because if I get a migraine, I have to lay down, or I'm going to be in like a lot of pain, right? So I decided to do like work at home, contract work, working for myself, and so far it's going well. But in a lot of ways, I'm privileged to be able to do that. But I left, like I'm doing academia in my way, right?
Yeah.
I'm academia adjacent. And that's what I had to do to like kind of accommodate these things. There's other reasons I left academia, but that's one of the major ones. So like this online conferences or online, I don't have funding for research anymore. These types of things, online research is so important. And yeah, I agree that was really beneficial. So I thought we'd wrap up this conversation by talking about how optimistic or pessimistic we are about everything. So we're a year and a half since you wrote that piece. We're like almost 3 years, and I don't know. Time doesn't. We're in a never-ending pandemic. So I just thought we wrap up by talking about like Do you think that these changes to academia in regards to accessibility and ableism are going to stick? Or are you feeling more like as things, as some sectors are trying to push back to normal, do you think that some of these things have failed to kind of make a lasting impression on academia?
That's one of those things where I want to be optimistic,
Mm-hmm.
but the fall term, which is wrapping up now, at Queens, we went back full force. So there was very few opportunities to teach online for students to take online courses,
Mm-hmm.
which in the context of the pandemic, even without disability, is stressful. So that was kind of frustrating to see that those options weren't as available because we'd proven that we could do it. And on the instructor side, there are plenty of master's, PhD researchers who could instruct, like in your situation, if they were given the opportunity to do
Mm-hmm.
it in their way.
Yeah.
So it was frustrating to see a lot of that go away. I had to move back to Kingston, away from
Mm-hmm.
my care network.
Yeah.
But I, again, luckily have wonderful friends whose job it isn't to look after me, but they do check in.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to pay an enormous amount of rent for an apartment that was accessible because those are hard to find.
Yeah.
But this term at Queens, we just got the announcement yesterday that we're going to be online till the end of February, which means it's both online and possibly in person. And I think that's
Mm-hmm.
actually harder for students, because for so many students, financially, they're stuck in rent contracts and things like that. But also
Yeah.
for students who are planning around their health, how can you plan for two places at once? And for multiple eventualities or possibilities, I
Yeah.
worry that we're putting the already vulnerable students in a more vulnerable position because they don't know. They can't
Mm-hmm.
commit to one location or another, or one type of learning or another. So their accommodations also get more complicated for people who need screen readers and things like that. Like the investments they're making in some of this technology, it's confusing.
Yeah.
Because you're living in with one foot in the door and one foot out, and I worry that for, again, students who experience chronic illness and things like that,
Mm-hmm.
this is just extra stress, which is not good for chronic illness. And for people with physical disabilities, like they'll have less time to adapt. I know that I had to plan a route to make sure that I could get to my classroom, because it's only accessible from some elevators and not others,
Yeah.
which totally makes sense. And I have students who partway through the term break a leg, and there's just a lot of confusion.
Yeah.
And I think we've proven that we can do it online, and with the pandemic, we've proven that it's not going away.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't we take some of these things that we've learned how to do and apply it more equalization wise across the board to people who need it? Because there are
Mm-hmm.
tons of great people out there who we could be learning from, and we aren't because we're limiting ourselves to physical classrooms or only to online. I think
Mm-hmm.
hybrid offerings are sometimes the way to go. You go with what the people need.
Yeah.
And I know that's a very it's each person has their own thing, and the university likes to do
Yeah.
blanket things across everything. But for accessibility purposes, we should be tailoring things more to people, because otherwise we miss out.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, I agree that I'm a bit pessimistic, but I'm glad that we have, like, those of us who want to fight for more accessibility kind of have more leverage now, right? We have more examples, like concrete things that have happened. More people are talking about disability and accessibility and whatnot. And I think, particularly the younger generation of students, like, they're also talking about this, like, they're just more informed about this stuff. And hopefully, even though I'm pessimistic, I do think small steps are being made. I want it to be faster, but yeah, well, yeah. I guess I'm just pessimistic.
I think there's a hint of optimism in there, but we also know change takes forever in academia.
Yes, it does, and that's another reason why. But yeah, just like, and I feel so much for people who are students, both grad and undergrad, right now. It's such a confusing time and yeah, stressful and totally different experience from, you know, what I experienced, what, I don't know, 15, 18 years ago. So, well, Victoria, I want to thank you for joining me today. This is a nice little chat. And I suggest everyone check out your piece from last fall. Check out the whole series because there was a lot of great stuff. There's other stuff about disability and accessibility, and it was really good. Yeah, thanks for joining me. Have a
Thank you
nice
for
day.
having me.
Take care.
You too.